Startups Inside Out, we have Deepali here today, who's an investor with both Alma Angels and Speedinvest. Can you tell us what you invest in?
Absolutely. So when I started Alma Angels, of course, I was doing a lot of angel deals. I was interested in sectors health, financial inclusion, and climate. Have not been angel investing for a while, but still very involved with Alma. At Speedinvest, we're a pre-seed seed investor that started in Austria in 2011. We have 6 sector teams: fintech, health, deep tech, industrial tech, SaaS, consumer marketplaces. I am in the fintech team. We also invest emerging markets. So I've been spending a lot of time Africa, Middle East, Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh over the last few years. And we also have a growth fund, what we call an opportunity fund, which doubles down in our winners, from the pre-seed seed portfolio, investing a lot in then, SaaS and defense and AI, robotics, as well as fintech.
So you're obviously investing a lot in the UK before switching more to emerging markets. How has that switch been? Like, what do you see different now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously very exciting. I grew up in an emerging market, so I understand and I've seen the India story unlock, right? So very exciting from the point of view, understanding not just the opportunity, but also the challenges. And many emerging markets are similar. If you look at LATAM and India and many of these emerging markets grew with fintech, and so we apply this fintech lens to Africa, the Middle East, Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So lots of analogies, but also lots of learnings. We have lots of learnings in Europe and the UK that we can not. I don't think it's a copy paste thing, but there are lots of learnings you can apply to the emerging markets. So very exciting. Also raising a fund now for that strategy. So it's been fun.
And
Lots more travel.
yeah,
Lots more travel, actually long haul travel. So
do you get people who say, for example, in the emerging markets, we're going to build the Revolut or the Monzo of this region? And then how do you know whether they're on the right track or not?
We get a lot of that because we have made some very interesting investments in our European portfolio, and we often have emerging market founders reach out and say, we want to build something like this, and you've invested in a company that is similar, and that's why they want us as investors, because they want the learnings, right, that we have. And I think it works out really well for us because we can also take some of our exited founders from our portfolio and marry them with founders that are building, or we could take some of the existing founders who have scaled and marry them with emerging market founders. So I think that synergy is really strong. And yeah, it's easy. I wouldn't say the emerging markets is different. There are many things that might not work there in the early days, and things that might work there that didn't work here. But of course, I think that blueprint helps us identify the right opportunities.
And with the fintech lens as well, because you said you invested in different industries beforehand. What makes you invest in fintech today?
I mean, I did financial inclusion. I started my career in investment banking in financial services in New York and did early growth investing for many years in financial services. So at that point, to be honest, there was very little fintech when I started investing. It was mostly, I was looking at banks, insurance companies, and then over time started looking at loyalty systems like Nectar, started looking at credit decisioning software. So I had done financial services for many years. Of course, the financial services of today is very different. But in the emerging markets, we think fintech is the underlying layer of any economy. And in the emerging markets, fintech investments have been more successful, right? It's really like, how do I add another revenue stream? Or how do I give credit to someone who's not banked by the traditional financial institutions? How do I make this payment cheaper for someone, right? They might not have credit cards. So I think fintech is the underlying layer of any growth, right? So I think that's why we apply a fintech lens.
I'm guessing as well, it must be really challenging where in the different markets, you have to understand the nuances of why this company might work in this country, but not in that country. How do you go about that? How do you learn all of that?
I think we've obviously been investing in fintech for many, many years in Europe as well as in the emerging markets. And some of it is knowing that, software is really hard to sell. Enterprise sales are really hard. People negotiate on price. I think it's really just trying to understand the local nuances. But we also, of course, have a local network, right? We talk to, just like we would DD a deal here, we DD a deal in one of those markets with people around us who are friends, micro GPs, angels, corporates, etc. So it's a normal DD process. Many of us didn't know anything about AI or robotics or women's health, or you know what I mean? And you just learn it as you go.
And you said you're now fundraising for a new fund as well.
Yeah.
Talk about that process. I think a lot of people who are founders maybe don't understand how much it's actually a lot harder to raise a fund, right?
It is. I would say that it's a patience and resilience game. It is very hard. I think much harder to raise a fund than to deploy it. And I can feel the pain, when founders raise. We as a team are raising an emerging markets fund for Africa, Middle East, Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh. It's going, I think it's going well, given 2025 was the worst year for fundraising in the venture capital industry. We did manage to sign an anchor for the Africa fund, which is good and very, very close. We have a few other commitments from the Middle Eastern side also, so very exciting. I think I can't say. I think if we can get an anchor and get investors, I think we're really lucky, to be honest. But it's a hard game. It's not easy.
How much of it is leaning on like the existing reputation with Speedinvest versus like the story of what's to come? How do you balance that out?
I mean, obviously, Speedinvest has a great reputation, right? So it really does help getting, I guess, the first meeting probably. We have, of course, targeted a whole new set of investors to invest in emerging markets that might or might not know Speedinvest. So in the case where they do know Speedinvest, of course, it's easier. We can leverage the network. In any case, the brand is strong enough that it helps you get the first meeting. But ultimately, it's your track record and it's the individuals and it's what you want to build, what you want to invest in. You have to convince them like any founder would have to convince us, right? So it's a similar type, but probably harder because what happens on the LP side is there are deadlines, but those deadlines are more fluid than, on the fund side when, funds deploy much quicker and the fund might sit on a deal for, 2 weeks or 2 months, but it's not going to be indefinite at some point. I think it's a longer enterprise, what I call an enterprise sales cycle when it comes to LPs.
Which side of it do you enjoy more, the deploying or the fundraising side?
Interesting question, huh? I mean, of course, I think good investors should be able to do both. And I think fundraising is equally as important as deploying. But of course, you cannot fundraise without being able to deploy well. And in some ways, if you deploy well, then the funds should come easier, right? But I think as investors, you should have skills to both fundraise as well as deploy. I don't want to say anything. I probably love meeting founders. It's a different kind of energy, right? When you're meeting someone and it's like going on a first date and then you want to go on that date, a second date, and it's just very exciting. So I probably say that I like deploying more, but of course, you have to do the job.
And I guess it's also the variety, right? Because you do both, it makes it more enjoyable. So if you're only ever meeting founders all the time, it probably gets quite tiring too.
I don't know. I do. I mean, I think it's I love meeting founders. I grew up with a dad who was an entrepreneur and who spoke about business ideas every day. So I kind of like that. Also like helping founders scale, right? Thinking about how they should build, what markets they should target, how they should price things, etc. So I think in any case, there's a lot of variety in the job.
But obviously you've got a lot of experience. So when you're talking to founders and talking about the value add you give, which areas do you kind of focus in on saying, like, this is the bit that I really can help you on?
I mean, of course, most VCs will tell you that they're value add, right? Of course, the VCs that they're more operators can also lend that operational lens, right? So as a VC, I would say there are a few different ways, right? One is the IMs that are on the board, or the IMs, even if not on the board, sometimes you have somebody who's not on the board and is closer to the entrepreneur than the people on the board, right? And I was having this conversation with just a founder that we both know 2 days ago, and he was telling me about how the guys on his board are not the ones he calls first, right? So I think we help them with, I personally, of course, I've helped with like recruiting, getting advisors in there, talking to big corporates for contracts. If they're submitting something, can we help, move the needle there by putting in a good word? Of course, fundraising, which is the easiest easiest thing to do, easiest part of a VC's job, I would say. And then on the Speedinvest side, we have a platform team that helps with, we have a portal where founders can come, talk to the other founders in our portfolio, talk to other advisors if they need, help. There's cap table support. There's all sorts of other platform support, PR support that we can give. I also run a female founder summit every year where we invite the Speedinvest portfolio founders, female founders, as well as any other female founders that we think are really strong in the ecosystem. And we spend 2 days of learning and mental health and well-being. I do a micro GP summit which is also investing into our fund managers that we've invested in emerging managers, and we do a program with them a whole day where we invite LPs and we do best practices. So these are things that Speedinvest does that I don't think most, I've not heard many other funds do. So it's quite different in terms of the support that we provide.
And obviously you said two different things there as well, the female founder community and also the micro GP community. And these kind of two other hats you're wearing as well, right? And how do you kind of juggle these? They're not extracurricular, but almost feels like on top of your investing in fundraising, you're also doing these too.
I think with the female founder, the thesis always was that we want to embed it in the organization. So it cannot be just one person's role to be like, yes, we should invest in the best female founders, right? So we took a firm-wide view that we should allocate a certain percentage of our capital. And for Speedinvest 4, that was 30% should be allocated to mixed teams, the female founders. And I think they're currently close to 25%. Which is 1 out of 4, which is fantastic. So, but I think that's distributed in the team. We don't want to have any biases where only one person is saying, oh, let's invest. I think we're beyond those days now, right? So while I do the Female Founder Summit, I have a lot of support from the Speedinvest team and, the junior people of the team, the senior people. So it's not me alone when I say. On the micro GP side, again, we took a view with Speedinvest 4 that we would invest in 15, 16 micro GPs. We are not an LP, we are a small check. It's like capacity building, helping, deal flow sharing, etc. So each micro GP sits with 2 people. It's usually the investment manager. So there's a SaaS fund. So it sits within the SaaS fund, and the SaaS IM actually takes care of that fund. Many of the diverse founders, obviously, I invested in, like many of the GPs that is fund there for OXO, and I brought in also KHP and others that had female GPs, but they all tend to technically sit with a team. So again, it's not me. And on the summit, while I put it all together, again, I have support from the Speedinvest team. I loop in whether it's Daniel, who's our head of fundraising, or Werner, who's our like chief negotiator, LPA, finance, business model person. He comes in. So it's like a team effort. So, but of course, you need somebody to spearhead those initiatives.
Obviously in the UK, so you co-founded Alma to look at female founders and just try and increase the investment there. But now you're working in the different regions. Obviously going to have to work with other organizations. So how are you uncovering kind of diverse deal flow in emerging markets?
Yeah, I mean, emerging markets is diverse to begin with, if you think about it, right? From a diversity standpoint, and this is when you start looking at other forms of diversity, right? Whether it's not just ethnic diversity, it's gender diversity. It is, where did this person come from? Because as you know, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, right? So you start thinking about the forms of diversity. I still will always have a close to my heart for gender diversity, obviously. And it's so strange because naturally I get invited to a lot of the female events, whether it's in Africa or I'm going to Riyadh right now and going to Davos next week. It's a female panel, right? So I think I do get invited to just by the sheer reason of all that I've done for so many years. And I will naturally look for those pockets and partner with organizations or we do founder office hours, etc. in those regions where we can meet more women.
Do you find any differences in founders when they're pitching you from an emerging market versus what you're used to in the UK? Have you seen any trends there where maybe they approach it a different way?
Yeah, very interesting question, to be honest. I have not, but I will say that they're hustlers. If you come from an emerging market, and you can understand this and I can understand this. I mean, I left India when I was 18, and I think that as opposed to my children, my daughter was born in New York, my son was born here. I feel like it's a different level of hustle. Right? It's like a survival, you need to survive, right? Of course, there are emerging market founders also who come from a privileged background, might have lived abroad and gone back to build. But I often see there's a huge amount of hustle to get because you're just competing with a lot more people for the same amount of money.
Because people often say, for example, US founders versus UK founders, where US is so much more confident and
bigger vision.
Bigger, yeah. So would you say the emerging markets, which way?
I mean, I just feel, I've seen really strong emerging market founders. I would say that there's a lot of hustle.
So let's say some of the other funds right now are thinking about diversifying to emerging markets, but there's always been this worry, I guess, that it's a risk that maybe they don't want to take on board. What made you think no, this is right, this is where?
I mean, Speedinvest and, Stefan, one of our general partners, started investing in emerging markets. I think it was first Turkey, and we did a deal in 2013. And to be honest, we sold that business in 2019. We did really well. We sold it to a South African financial services business. Again, it was Fintech. And then we did 2019 and 2020. We did 2 Nigerian businesses. One is now going out for a Series A, and now the other one is going out for a massive, it's a unicorn already. So I think it's dipping your toe with a check. Assuming you have somebody from the emerging markets will always help, because you can navigate that ecosystem better. But dipping your toe, understanding what you want to invest in, understanding what your value add and your thesis is, I think some of that helps. Emerging market does not come without its own set of risks and currency issues, etc., etc. But I think I do think that 50% of the population in the future will be the global south. Africa is a big piece of that. And one cannot ignore India anymore. I can't even call it an emerging market anymore, to be honest. It's very exciting. And having grown up in India, it gets me really excited, even more excited than ever before, when I see capital allocators telling me we really want to allocate capital to India, right? So you cannot ignore these markets anymore.
So before you started off mainly with angel investing, right? Or you did that for a long time?
I mean, I did investing over many years in the US and the UK before I started angel investing, yeah.
And with the different lenses, you said you're not angel investing right now.
Yeah.
With the different hats you wear as like a VC investor versus an angel investor, how do you think about deals differently?
Yeah. I mean, as an angel investor, I did more than 30 deals, by the way. My first deal was Pension B, which went public on the London Stock Exchange. And then, several invested in Shellworks and Y Hangry and many others, Sana Genetics, etc., that have raised a lot of money from, a lot of female founders, primarily female founders that have raised from really good funds. As an angel, I wanted to invest in anything that I loved. I fell in love with the founder, and I thought the market was interesting enough. And because I did deals at very low valuations, right? I think Pension B was the highest one that I ever did, but many I did at 2 and 3 and 4 million. And those companies went on to raise at 70 and 80 and more than that. And I think at that point it was for me investing in something I loved. It was a learning story for me. How do I learn more about the sector? And also, how do I support women? For me, that was very, very key, right? With my venture hat on, I obviously think differently, right? The outcome has to be significantly larger, given the size of our fund. You can't necessarily just invest in the founder. You really have to look at the market dynamics, the competition, how it fits in my own portfolio construction, which I didn't think about. I could do 2 deals in the same sector in women's health and not worry, right? But I think as a firm, you have to think about, I have exposure to 2 things here. Will I be able to do a 3rd thing? So all those dynamics come out.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm Amardeep Parmar, co-founder of BayHQ and the host of this show. For those of you who don't know, BayHQ is the community for high growth Asian heritage founders and investors in the UK. Over 7,500 people have attended our events, 200 people have been through our impact programs, and obviously there's been over 250 episodes of this podcast. If you want to join us and take part in the programs and come to the events, go to bayhq.com/join. We also just released our first ever book called Startups for Outsiders, which you can get on Amazon now, and the link is in the bio. Hope to see you soon at our event. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. And you said you're investing for a long time. What do you think changes in what you've looked at as well in terms of how you judge a founder? Because I remember when I first started angel investing, I was a lot easier to impress because you don't know as much, right? But obviously the more you invest, the harder it is, the higher the bar is.
Yeah, I mean, that is very true. I will say that. And David and I have this conversation all the time at Alma, because he's always like, you think like a VC now? And I'm like, no, David, I just think more like an investor. Not to say that investors are not human beings. We do, you have the same approach. But I do think more like, is this the right price? What is the exit I can get here, etc. But so that has changed. It is, but a good founder when see a good founder. There's something about your gut. And I think this is where I go back to whether or not it's impressing. I think there's a gut in investing that people don't give enough credit to, and there's a luck in investing that people don't give enough credit to because of the nature of the job. You always say, oh my God, he has a fantastic record. There's a lot of luck and there's a lot of gut, right? Which are both things you can't really quantify.
We're thinking about with the fund now as well, right? And one thing I thought about, let's say we do 40 investments. Let's say the 40th investment is one that becomes a unicorn. That's the one that messes us up because you kind of want it to be an early one, but you have no idea, right? Like you obviously invest in everything with the best hopes, but a unicorn in the beginning of the fund versus at the end of the fund affects whether or not you can raise a second fund.
I think the second fund, to be honest, is okay because by the time you raise the second fund, your first fund has, I mean, it depends. If you're, by the way, there are micro GPs we've invested in that have already not returned the fund, but they've given us distributions, right? Really strong ones that might have invested in a Lovable or another, health business that we looked at. So I think there happened distributions, and we invested 3 years ago, right? So, but in many cases, that's because of what's happening in AI, that you're seeing these huge outcomes suddenly, and you're seeing distributions. Otherwise, usually in the past, you could raise a second fund, and I would also say probably a third fund without having to show real numbers. Not real numbers, but without having to show distributions in your first fund. What LPs would normally do is then they would look at the underlying companies and try and judge for themselves, are these companies any good? So I think you would be okay. I think you would be okay. But obviously the market has also shifted a lot.
And obviously you mentioned AI there as well, right? So how is that changing the way that you're looking at investments? Because things are moving so much faster. How do you know this is something which has legs and can keep going?
Yeah, of course, the European team has done a lot of AI deals, right? And verticalized AI, whether it's compliance, whether it's healthcare, whether it's, we look at construction, logistics, all of these different sectors and how AI fits in there. We were talking about this in the Fintech team yesterday, where it comes to agentic payments, and we were talking about, would somebody be okay with delegated authority on the payment side? Because there are many companies building for agentic payments, right? But then who takes on the liability if something goes wrong? Is it the bank? Is it the software provider? And maybe it comes earlier on the B2B side than on the B2C side. But we think about these themes, and we think about, of course, there's AI in operations. That's the easiest form, right? Customer service, etc. But AI, next-gen wealth management company 2.0, because AI suddenly enables you to service many more customers at a cheaper cost, and therefore you can take lower account values, from your current customers, opens up a whole new base. You can service customers that you were not servicing before, right? So we are obviously trying to find companies that might be doing this, looking at, like I said, agentic payments, looking at all different places and seeing where we can find stuff. On the emerging market side, we are seeing companies that are using our own portfolio company, using AI for, credit decisioning, right? Using some of the unstructured data, making it structured. If you convert structured to really, then an LLM can sit upon it and make better credit decisioning. Or you can have personalized payment plans. Somebody cannot pay at a certain time. Can AI give me based on their old payment history and their income, etc. What should this payment plan look like? On the debt collection side, can AI spend 80%, or the easier cases, the AI can call and collect money. So we're seeing all different use cases. Yeah, that's on the fintech side. But overall, the European team has done many AI bets.
How do you think about with 2026 as well? And the trends and where you think the market's going to head?
Within what, sorry?
Within 2026.
Oh, within 2026. Interesting. I mean, in Europe, you're obviously going to see robotics and defense, which are big themes. Crypto, we just did a crypto neobank, which is very interesting, called D-Block. So you're going to continue to see some of those themes. Sovereignty, European sovereignty, just like American sovereignty, right? Whether it's space, etc. So you will see those themes. And on the emerging market side, I'm also seeing a lot of stable coins, like Nala. I think the business is interesting. What Benji is building. I've seen a lot in stable coins. I've seen credit against stable coins because there's not instant settlement, etc. So yeah, and in Africa, Middle East, we continue to see embedded finance, focus on SME, which AI, to be honest, will help some of this. So those are some of the themes I'm looking out for.
Is there any gaps as well you're seeing? So you mentioned about SME funding and things like that. Where are gaps you're kind of looking for companies that are in those sectors?
I mean, obviously, SMEs or the long tail in Africa, for example, or India, right? It's always the long tail that's interesting. But the long tail is the hardest to onboard, the hardest to service because there's low value. So if you look at health insurance in Africa, the average order, the payments are so low because people cannot afford health insurance. It's not top of the pyramid. So then you look to find other ways to service them better to be able to pick them up. Or sometimes it's cultural, right? So there are SMEs, and long tail is always the more interesting bit in emerging markets, but very hard to service. So of course, I'm looking there. Or farmers, Africa 70% is farmers. And how can you get more money to the smallholder farmers? Is there credit options for seeds? Can you give them credit against what they're going to produce, their produce, or can you do supply chain credit? So but I do think the long tail is quite interesting in emerging markets.
And like, let's say people are building the emerging markets now and like they happen to come across this podcast and listening to this. What are you looking for in that? So what do they need to show you to try and get you excited?
Yeah, I mean, obviously on the early stage side, it's in just emerging markets or Europe, the team is team, right? It's really founder market fit. Why they're the best team to build this? How can they make this a really big business? Those are the answers. And if the later stage businesses, we will obviously go through we look at team and traction, right? So I can't say there's one thing I'm looking for, but again, it's it's a combination of it all. But happy to talk to anyone who's building in fintech or fintech enabled in the emerging markets. That's what we invest in.
One thing with the team as well, I think, because we help a lot of founders, right? But I think a lot of people misunderstand what a strong team is. And someone might, for example, put like ex-Google. There's like about 1 million people work at Google over the last decade, right? It doesn't necessarily mean much. So like when people are thinking about how to explain their team, it obviously is more than just logos, right? How can they frame it in a way that really like stands out to you? What do you see in some of your investments, for example, which really made that team stand out?
I mean, of course, we love like people who built, right? So ex-entrepreneurs, but also product people, tech people. These are skills that are hard to find. A good product person who's spending time with the customers to really understand what to build, what are the features that people want. So I think some of it is really more. We of course would do our diligence, right? But you put a logo on there, and we will dig beneath the logo, and we will call people and we'll discuss. But people who essentially build things in large companies, very interesting. We also look at deep domain knowledge. Why is this person? If you're looking at, for example, a health company, right? Or why is this person? What bio knowledge are they bringing to make them best at building what they want to build? Of course, we also look at coachability and leadership and motivational and sales capability, because CEO's job a lot of the times, just like ours, is really selling. Whether we're selling to the founders, they're in this case selling to LPs, they're selling to the employees, they're selling to customers. So really and to investors. So how well can they sell? So we try and gauge all of that. And I can't say that it's just like falling in love. It really is. It's like, I really want to invest in. At the end of the day, it's like a connection that you have with someone. It's human, right? It's not AI.
One thing you see now as well is obviously people from the UK or from the US who are now trying to build in emerging markets as well. How are you like judging them? Are you seeing some quite good people, say maybe UK based, but have Kenyan heritage, who are now going to build out in Kenya? How are you finding that? Are those people seem to do well? Are they have an advantage over locals, or is it kind of neck and neck?
Yeah, very interesting question, because India saw this, right? When I left India when I was 18, it was like a brain drain from India to the US. I was probably one of the few women who left, but there were many guys who left and they went to study there or work there, and then they stayed on. And to be honest, then we saw a reverse brain drain, and we saw many of the Indian diaspora that had worked at big corporate or had made some money and said, I want to go back to my own country and build. And they saw like that really helped India. And I think we, of course, have invested in many founders like this. Just so you know, in Africa, we have many founders who are of African heritage, lived in the US, studied in the US, lived in the UK, and have built. And I see this very often, especially with the UK. There's a very strong link between Africa and the UK. So see this very often, and they want to go back and change the lives of their own people. right? And it's this very mission-driven approach, and I really like that, and I love that, and we love backing diaspora founders because they bring the best of both worlds. They understand the Western mindset, and they come from a local. They understand the local region.
It's one interesting we found in this podcast, right? So we interview people of Asian heritage, but so many people weren't necessarily born here. So a lot of the entrepreneurs, like people obviously there's a certain standards come on the podcast, right? So many of those people weren't born here. Whereas many of the people may be born here because they're used to the system, they're familiar with it. That's an interesting trend we've kind of picked up about actually there's a lot fewer UK born and raised people building here from Asian heritage. Whereas a lot of people come from maybe university or the first job.
Yeah.
Because it's the risk taking, right?
Yeah, it's the risk taking. It is the hustle, right? You know that you want to do really well because you've left home and everything that comes with it. Because it's not just it's not a financial choice. It's like a emotional choice that you make, right? You leave your parents, you leave your family, and you come somewhere, and there's a lot more to prove. And there's a survival, right? Unless you come from a privileged background, most people come here and they're like, I want to build, and I want to build something big. And so I'm not surprised by that at all. And I don't think it's just in the UK. I'm sure it's the same in the US.
And you lived in the US as well as the UK. How has that moved for you? Because obviously, like you said, you're having to come out and like adapt to a new environment, and obviously you built the career you have afterwards.
Yeah, it's funny because you say that because I have this conversation at home all the time. And I always tell, my husband grew up in Africa and he moved to the US. And I always tell my children that you have no idea how easy you have it, right? Because I was graduated from university and went to University of Rochester, where local companies came to recruit, but it wasn't like a lot of like, I wanted to work at an investment bank. And I literally went to the alumni office, the career office, and I said, give me the alumni database. And I had this at that point, it was not even like digital, right? And they said, here, and I've probably emailed every single person from that database that worked in investment banking in New York. And not just once, I probably emailed them 10 times, called them, emailed them, spoke to their assistants, managed to get 2 interviews. And then out of those 2 interviews, I got 2 jobs. And then I could decide, this is the one I want to take. And I think from that point on, and not just that, the journey probably started when I was 18 because I could work in the US and I was studying, but I was working 20 hours a week when I was not studying, right? Because I wanted to be able to pay for my expenses. And I think so that hustle starts really young. I don't think that hustle ever goes away, right? So, and I'm so happy to see so many Indians, and I'm saying this in the best way possible, that I'm seeing, every successful startup in Silicon Valley probably has an Indian involved in some way or the other, right? It's really wonderful to see that because I grew up in India where there was no electricity, there was very few phone lines. So it was there was one TV channel, which was Doordarshan when I was growing up, right? So having seen the India story play out and having seen so many Indians in Silicon Valley. And to be honest, in the last 10 years, so many Indians in London, because I've been in London for a long time, I've never seen this, seen so many Indians building also in venture funds, senior people, starting their own funds, starting their solo GP, running big funds. I mean, it's really heartwarming for me to see. I just love it.
It's interesting about young people as well, because I think it's such a big challenge now, right? People at universities or schools, because we work with a lot of them, and often they ask, like, what advice would you give us? And because the markets are shifting so much, like, I don't know, it's hard for me to say what you should do. But let's say, like, when your children are at kind of university age and things like that, would you kind of encourage them to almost do the route you did of like work hard at the same time? And well,
and I tell my daughter this, she's in university, and I'm like, did you get a job? Like, it's great because I think getting good grades should be a part of the job. In my view, if you're a student, you should be working hard enough, right? And getting there. But I think, what are you doing beyond just working? Because I think the world is very competitive, no matter what, right? And I tell her all the time, I tell my son, who's now 16, he's doing his mocks right now, and he's built a trading model that he's very interested in, and he looks at these charts all day long. And I'm like, I know you're sitting inside this box and doing stuff, but you need to be out there talking to people, who are the best traders, read books on these people, listen to podcasts, talk to people, because I think that's where you really learn. I think the human connection is very important. Or pick up the phone and say, I want to work for you. He wrote his first cover letter and his like email or whatever. And it was very cute. It was almost like he said, I want to work for you guys because on your website it says you are good at risk management, and I myself as a young trader want to understand how to manage my risks without cutting gains. And it came from the heart, and I was like, this might sound naive to someone reading it, but I think this is what people need to do. Really need to think about who can and do it. Like I still send cold emails, and I still do that all the time, just so you know. And I think there is no there is no shame, and there is no shame in also asking again and again.
So I guess we both have the same thing of people asking us lots of questions, right?
Yeah.
So we might regret saying that now. But it comes back at us, we're like, no. They're like, but you say on the podcast to keep asking. That's why I always say that I never tell anybody to email me. It's like, it's going to bite back. And with that as well, I think one of the things I think a lot of people underestimate is that value of side projects. And it's like, it doesn't have to be the next big thing. But just the fact that you tried to build something, and even like everybody knows that the first company often isn't the one that's successful, right? So just get your first reps out of the way. Build something, even if don't put your entire life savings into it. But if you build something and it fails, the process of trying to make it work, you learn so much. And I think for so many people, especially they've come from good grades, they've come from that.
It's the fear of failing. It's the fear of failing. And to be honest, the fear of failing, the fear of not knowing what's going to happen, all of these things hold us back, right? But this is what makes us who we are. With every rejection, you learn something from that story. And I think you take away something, and hopefully it's more resilience and wanting to do it again.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting now where, and it's also the COVID generation of kids where they didn't have that same access to people and things too. And it's, as everything gets with AI and stuff like this, like you said with your sons, like if people can actually build relationships, that's what's going to be protecting. Because you said when you meet founders and you like them, it's like, can you have that magnetism, right? Can people chat to you, feel the passion, feel the fire in you? And if you can't do that, it's going to be hard for you, right?
100%. And really your network is your net worth even more and more now. With AI, I feel like, and what I mean is real relationships, not like transactional relationships, right? Real relationships, because I really think they can be very helpful.
How did you build your network when you moved to the UK? Because obviously...
Yeah, I mean, obviously I also spent some, I think my father, I learned it from my dad, who was very non-transactional in his approach to relationship building. And he always said to me, have the approach about how you can help someone rather than what you can get from them. That's the approach that you should have, right? So I think that's the approach that I used to take when building a relationship. And I think I also don't really add people on LinkedIn unless I don't know them. I might do outbound and reach out to them and say, I'd love to talk to you. But if somebody sends me something without a request, there's zero likelihood that I will add them. Many times if they write me a message, then I'll reply and then do a call with them and then add them, right? And I think it just takes a longer process, but at least I know that my network is then people I actually know, right? Than people, just random people that I might never be able to work with, etc. So that's the approach I took, and I'm also trying to help as much as possible. We're all really busy people, right? But I think that every good deed comes back in some form or the other.
And this way I can probably take advice from you here. So with how much we've expanded in the last 2 years, I have this problem now of how do I maintain the relationship, right? Because I get to sit across here from so many people who've done interesting things. They've got great stories. They're all really interesting. But I can't be best friends with all of them. And it's, how do you try and maintain that? And I think that the most important thing I've realized is that the people who are the right people, they understand that you're busy. It's not a personal thing. But you obviously got a much bigger network over different years.
It's very hard. It's very hard. I also don't try and keep up with everybody, right? Of course, there's your inner circle, whether it's your inner circle of VCs who you talk to, your inner circle of friends that you talk to. Of course, helping somebody, you don't need to, they don't need to be part of your inner circle for you to help them, right? But even if I can't vouch for somebody, I'll always pass something on. I'll always say, okay, this is from somebody who I know. I don't know them very well, but I just want to pass this on because you're recruiting. I think that is a small thing I can do without too much sweat or too much work, right? But I don't think, I also have 5 really good friends. I don't have many, you know what I mean? And I see the same people. I'm one of those like very boring, routine people. I like seeing the same people. I like going to the same places. I like doing the same things. So I think, but I'm also of that age now where it's really hard to keep up with everybody, right? So I wish I had better advice for you, but I think it's really a random story. But 2 days ago, I saw a meeting show up in my diary from a lady called Sarah. And I don't remember when I met her last, but she clearly had my calendar link and she put a diary meeting in. So I got on the call and she says, hey, Deepali, I met you 2 years ago at in Paris at WVCE. And I was like, thank you, Sarah. Great to reconnect. I did not remember her. And she goes, I'm raising a new fund. And I saw this Speedinvest Fund of Fund announcement. And I said, yeah, that was an old one. We obviously haven't launched the new fund of fund. And, you know, we do fund sizes. And her fund size was too large. And she said, I completely understand. So silly of me not to realize that, you know, you guys obviously invest also earlier stage. So our fund would not. And I said, no problem, you know, lovely to reconnect. And she said something about Davos. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm invited to speak, but I just started checking if I can get a room. I obviously cannot probably get a room. And she said, I'll carry an air mattress for you from Munich. And she's bringing an air mattress for me from Munich in a flat that she's staying at with 7 other women. And I said, are you sure? I've only met her once before in my life. And she was like, absolutely. And not just that, she's introduced me to the whole Davos ecosystem. She sent me events. She sent me these are the other panels you can be on. So I'm just saying that it's a small thing, but you can never underestimate the power of your network. And I never really expected this. So here I am going on a plane where most people can't find a spot to stay the week before I have a bed.
So just before there's a quick fire questions, because I'm worried about time now.
Yeah.
So with the report we did, right? So we got 0.2% of funding last year went to all female founder teams or all Asian heritage female founder teams. And obviously it's something which you're really passionate about. And I think we're both investors in Why Hungry, for example.
Yeah.
And how have you seen the market change? Do you think there is positive move being made? Or do you think what needs to be done? Or how can people listening get involved more?
I mean, obviously businesses need to be not every business is venture fundable, right? Or should be venture funded, right? Many of them are angel. And to be honest, Pension B, the one that went public, only ever raised angel funding. They never raised from venture fund. I think she raised 30 million from angels over time and then went public, right? So I don't think venture is the answer to everything. There are businesses that get grants, there are businesses, so it's a whole spectrum of who should be the right investor here. And I think things are changing. I mean, I overall, I think from when I started investing first, it was very hard for women to raise. And I think change always comes slowly. And I think with the right businesses, people do get funded.
So quick fire questions now, so we can make sure that you're cool. So who are 3 Asians in Britain you think are doing incredible work right now and you'd love to shout them out?
I mean, one I would definitely say is Benji and Nala. I love what he's building. And I love that he's a founder, that he, spends time on products, spends time with people. And he also does a lot of like community stuff, right? So I think he brings people together in his flat. And there are things about that are very humane that I really like. So I would definitely say Benji. I would say Amira. She helps us a lot at Alma. And she is one of those non-transactional people who thinks about you and says, how can I help you? And I love that about her. And she has this spark, it's that young spark energy I really like. Nikita, it included, I think no matter what, you need more inclusivity in the VC ecosystem. I love that. Kanishka, who's our new AI minister, he used to be at Clock Tower. I think what he's trying to do for AI and tech, these are some of the people I think. Of course, my list is quite long, but...
And then, is there any way that people listening today could help you?
I mean, when I first started investing, right, or when I first started investment banking, there was very, very few women, very, very few Indians, very, very few ethnic minorities. So I think we really need to think beyond. I think we need to build inclusive ecosystems, right? So because talent, again, is equally and more distributed, but opportunity is not. And I think when we're looking for candidates for our companies, for our boards, for our investments, I think we need to think beyond just, what you see representative, because what is representative has also now changed. The populations have changed.
And if people want to follow you or learn more about what you're up to, where's to go?
LinkedIn. I don't think I'm like adding much on Twitter or anything. Yeah, but LinkedIn. And Speedinvest, of course, we have a website, we have a blog, we have a tight form that you can apply directly. Founders can apply. And so Alma as well, they have a website and form.
So thanks so much for coming on. Any final words?
For having me. No, just really excited to be here and love what you're doing. So thank you for having me.